Help support the show by joining the Patreon or becoming a YouTube member. Also, hit that like button and subscribe if you want more Browns-focused content.
So, an interesting day in Berea. So, Paul Depodesta, who, for lack of a better explanation, has kind of become the main boogeyman and magnet for most conspiracy-brained Browns fans about what's going on with the team. He is now taking a job, I believe, to be the president of baseball operations for the Colorado Rockies. Now, if you remember, Paul Depodesta came from, I believe, the Oakland Athletics when they were still a thing, and I think they're now about to move to Vegas. But he came from Oakland Athletics. He was Jonah Hill's character in Moneyball. He was seen as one of the innovators of analytics in sports. And if you look at any front office in any sport, basketball, baseball, football, I'm pretty sure, soccer, hockey, analytics, and that way of looking at sports has really taken root. You look at all the Super Bowl champions over the last 10 years, all of those teams make analytics a big part of what they do. The same is true in baseball and in, other sports as well, basketball, right? The Oklahoma City Thunder just won a championship. They are real big into analytics. The Boston Celtics were huge into analytics the year that they won the championship. The Golden State Warriors were a dynasty. They were huge into analytics. So I know people use analytics as a boogeyman phrase and are afraid of it. But all analytics is data. And data, when used correctly, helps your teams win. Plenty of teams win championships while being heavily focused in analytics. And Depodesta was the guy who kind of switched from, relying on your eye to just having that information and getting more information to back you up. And he was seen as one of the better ones at it. Hence why he's still in demand to this day. I know Browns fans might have one opinion of him or another opinion of him, but, he's going to a job where he's going to be the president of baseball operations for the Colorado Rockies. So it's not like he's taking a demotion here. He's getting a promotion. Now, as far as how this affects the Browns, I don't think it's going to make much of an effect here. The person who's in charge of football operations for the Cleveland Browns, for the most part, is Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski. Those are the two people that Jimmy leans on the most for football-related decisions. And those are the guys that, especially at this point, Jimmy is most inclined to listen to. I know there's been theories of, Depodesta is this boogeyman and he's whispering in Jimmy's ear to do certain things, and maybe he's responsible for the Deshaun Watson trade or this and that. I don't know if that's true. What I do know is from how his job has been described to me, how his work responsibilities have been described to me, I would find it very unlikely that Depodesta was that involved to be this boogeyman behind Jimmy Haslam, right? We're talking about somebody who for the last couple of years, it's been confirmed, has been basically a part-time employee. I don't think he's been making every decision behind the scenes for the Cleveland Browns, right? So he leaves, takes the Colorado Rockies job. If we're wondering what Paul Depodesta did, from what I know, he was somebody who gave recommendations and knew kind of statistical things to look at, what's important, like when the Browns were really into RAS scores or when they're into different age profiles. He sends out informations, makes different reports, gets different reports commissioned. Basically, he acts as research and development for the team, and gets those statistics and statistical suggestions to the football ops people, and then Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski decide of all this stuff that they're sent, what they find to be important and make a priority and put more resources into, and what they don't really care about, and they've filtered out this throughout plenty of years, right? It's why Andrew's drafts have gotten better over the years. It's why the Browns' philosophy on going for it on fourth down has changed over the years, stuff like that. He's not like directly making decisions. From what I hear, he was a suggestion guy. He makes suggestions. Maybe you take them, maybe you don't. Most famously, the most concrete thing we know about Depodesta, because Jimmy Haslam has told us this, is that he was the guy in 2019, well, in 2018, 2017, when he first got here. He did not want to hire Hugh Jackson. He wanted to hire Sean McDermott. In 2019, he did not want to hire Freddie Kitchens. He wanted to hire Kevin Stefanski. So that's what we know about Depot. I know Depodesta has been a magnet for a million different conspiracy theories. I have looked into this and talked to people about Depodesta who would know more than me and more than the average person on the internet. Nobody comes back saying, yeah, man, he's controlling shit. It's more or less like, I don't even really know if he works here because he's not around a ton. So him taking a job to be president of a baseball team, that makes a ton of sense to me, right? That way, he's more than just a guy who's making suggestions. He's somebody who can implement what he does at a higher level, and he's back to the sport that he started with football, where his ability to make decisions was always going to be limited by the fact that he's not somebody with a football background. I think the Browns always preferred, even if they like the analytics, like the numbers, to lean on people with football backgrounds, right? Even if you look at Andrew Berry's background, it's super football, right? He was a defensive back in college. He then was a scout for basically his whole adult life, and now he's a general manager. Kevin Stefanski, another guy who was a defensive back in college and then went on for a very long coaching career as an assistant and then got the job as a head coach. So, the fact that he didn't have any real like football credentials was always going to stop him from being able to make decisions for the Cleveland Browns. And I think that's part of the reason why his role became more and more part-time as the organization put more and more trust into Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski. Kind of his job was done, right? He was more of somebody to help the Browns find some structure, find an organizational order that works. And when I say an organizational order, a line of command that's not as chaotic. Because again, Depodesta was brought in and given a little bit more power after the Hugh Jackson thing to fix that. Because you remember the Hugh Jackson thing was a complete mess. You had the GM reporting directly. Well, not even just the Hugh Jackson thing. I think all the coaches before they hired Kevin, right? You had the GM reporting directly to the owner. You also had head coaches reporting directly to the owner. You had all these different lines, people trying to like jump people for jobs, whatever Todd Haley was trying to do in 2018. And what he was brought in to do was to stabilize the whole thing, create a structure where Jimmy is not being asked for day-to-day decisions. He's not being bothered constantly by his general manager, by his head coach, and that he can have more on his plate as far as what he wants to do in his life. And you have seen over the last few years, if you've been paying attention to Jimmy Haslam, that he's gotten into the ownership of the Milwaukee Bucks. He's also gotten into being the Columbus Crews owner. This is all stuff he's done after a couple of years with Andrew Berry, to the point to where he trusts him, and now Andrew has more power, right? Andrew, I don't know if a lot of people notice, he's not just the general manager of the Cleveland Browns. He's the executive vice president of football operations, and he's the only person with that title. That tells you who has the power when it comes to football ops, right? Him, maybe a little Kevin Stefanski. I'm sure Kevin is always conferred with most major decisions, but Andrew has the power to do whatever he wants in football operations. So, I know people thought that was Depodesta, but that's not how that thing is gone. The chain of operations are always, everything filters through Andrew Berry since probably around 2022, 2023. And then it gets to Jimmy from Andrew, right? That's how that whole thing works. So he's gone. There's more to talk about with the Cleveland Browns. There's more to talk about with this. But before I get into that, got to thank my sponsor for today, Sleeper. Real quick, just want to let you guys know Sleeper has a new offer here. They're offering a free $20 entry, no deposit required. And also, if you're a first-time user, you also will receive a 100% match on up to $100 when you use the promo code Worst Take. Again, $20 free, no deposit required. Plus, first-time users also receive 100% deposit match up to $100. Join Sleeper. Now, the one thing that we do know about Depodesta, and I alluded to it earlier, was that he had some really strong recommendations for the Browns when it came to head coach that would give me the feeling that he knows how to identify a head coach a little bit better than the average person can. Which, look, the Browns, maybe they're just dead set in not replacing Kevin Stefanski, and they're going to keep Kevin. I'm not confident we're going to look back on that kindly in a year or two, but hopefully I'm wrong here. But if the Browns do move on from Kevin, I do think not having Depodesta in there is not great for them. I think Depodesta had, the one thing we knew for sure about him was that he was good at that. There was also the Carson Wentz thing, right? He didn't want Carson Wentz in the top 20 of the draft. He was kind of right on that. But that's where those are the three things we really know for a fact we can confirm with no doubt about it that Depodesta had suggested. And obviously the Browns only really listen to one of those things, which is the Carson Wentz one. They went and hired Freddie Kitchens, and they also hired Hugh Jackson over his recommendation, which kind of spits in the face of this idea that he controls everything. Now, some people say, hey, after the disaster of Hugh Jackson, he got more control. But again, if you just look at the Browns since 2020 and you look at who has gotten more power, I don't think we got to look hard for the answer here. The answer is obvious to me. It's Andrew Berry. That's the guy who has taken the most amount of power over the last couple of years. That's the guy with the executive vice president of football operations in the title of his name. That's the guy who has the ability to go on a press conference and say, we're going to make a strategic pivot. Like, that's the dude in charge for the most part, right? Kevin has his say, but this comes down to Andrew. They trust Andrew. He's called himself the steward of the Cleveland Browns. Like, I don't know why people have looked for Depodesta to be the answer to this conspiracy when there's no conspiracy, because the Browns are telling you straight up who's in charge. It's Andrew Berry. Like, that's it. That's it. That's the guy who's making the plans right now as far as football ops go. That's the guy who has a say on the long-term vision of the team. Everybody else gets to have input, including Paul Depodesta when he was here, but it's Andrew at the end of the day, and it's been Andrew probably since 2022, since he's gotten a couple years under his belt. And keep in mind, Andrew was here under Sashi Brown, right? Like, he had the most familiarity with the organization when him and Kevin both arrived. So that just continued with Andrew Berry. So, since he's been kind of stabilized as the executive vice president of football ops for the Cleveland Browns, I think that's who's been in charge. That's probably if the Browns fire Kevin Stefanski, who's going to be in charge of the coaching search. I think internally they see Andrew Berry as their Howie Roseman. It is important to note how many head coaches Howie Roseman has outlived in Philadelphia, right? There have been times where he's given up his final say on the final 53, like with Chip Kelly, got it back, gave it up again, then got it back, and then Doug Peterson came back, and then they fired Doug Peterson after he won a Super Bowl, and then now they're on to the next coach. I think they view Andrew Berry as their Howie. We'll see, and I think at one point they viewed Kevin Stefanski as their Andy Reid. Like, those analogies that they have given us publicly are important because it tells us how they view this team. If Andrew is saying that he thinks that Kevin's his Andy Reid, well, who does Andrew think he is? Howie Roseman, who was there for Andy Reid and also fired Andy Reid, and then hired Chip Kelly, and then fired Chip Kelly, and then hired Doug Peterson, and then fired Doug Peterson. So that's kind of what the Browns front office thing has been. Now there's less doubt about it. Andrew Berry's in charge. We all know that Andrew Berry's in charge. There's no more boogeyman that we can play now that Depodesta's out of here. But I do wonder if there is a head coaching search or a larger coaching search. Will Depodesta's presence be missed? Or was Depodesta at a place where he was so part-time with the Cleveland Browns, even if they fired Kevin, he wasn't going to play a major role in that, which is also possible. There's some news about the players. Let's talk about the news with the players. Shedeur is back at practice limited. Let's have a quick conversation about when I think Shedeur will play. If Dylan does not look good this week, I do question whether they should play Shedeur against the Baltimore Ravens at home. They're kind of in a pickle here, right? Because if Dylan does not play well, it's going to be a brutal environment for Dillon Gabriel at home in Cleveland. People are going to be chanting for Shedeur. People are going to be booing him. It's just not the confidence-building environment you want to put a quarterback in. So you might say to yourself, okay, well, if Dylan doesn't play well against the Jets and the Browns don't win that game, let's just put in Shedeur, make the fans happy. Where whatever our record is after the Jets game anyways, who cares? But hey man, if I wasn't okay with Dylan going up against the Minnesota Vikings in his first start, I definitely have to object to the idea of Shedeur going up against the Ravens. That's a crazy unfair situation to put Shedeur in, right? They're kind of tied. Either you're going to get Dillon Gabriel booed horrendously from this crowd if the offense doesn't turn around, similar to what happened with Deshaun. Now, it won't be as vitriolic as Deshaun Watson because he doesn't have the other stuff hanging over his head that Deshaun Watson did, right? People didn't just not like Deshaun Watson. People legitimately hated Deshaun Watson. So people just don't like Dillon Gabriel, right? And they don't even have an issue with Dillon. They just don't like the offense and they want something to change, and he's the thing that can change, right? Kevin's already given up the play calling. Dillon is now the thing that can change. So they're going to want that change to happen, but it's going to feel like hate to Dillon Gabriel and anybody watching. So if you address that and you push Shedeur in, yeah, the fans won't boo immediately, but dude, you're putting Shedeur against the Baltimore Ravens, who seem to be surging, and most importantly, healthy on defense again. It's just unfortunate. It's 2 times you played the Ravens, 2 absolute worst times to play them. So do you just give Dillon, do you just eat that game and just let Dillon go out there? Or do you throw Bailey Zapp in there and just say, he's disposable, throw him in there? I don't know. But if Dillon does not play well, that is going to be a shitty environment for whoever plays quarterback that week, whether it be Shedeur, whether it be Dillon, whether it be Bailey Zapp. And I'm not sure if I want to debut Shedeur in that game. Maybe the next week's game on the road against the Raiders. But man, at home against the Ravens, as well as they've been playing, maybe he could pull one off. I mean, look, Jameis Winston won that game last year, so maybe Shedeur can pull it off, and maybe they know he's capable of that, and if that's the case, throw him in there. But I'm not going to lie, the same hesitancy I had about putting in Dillon before the first 6 weeks of the season was over, I'm going to have that same concern about Shedeur because it feels incredibly unfair to put Shedeur in that moment. But his back is healthier. He's limited at practice. We'll see what he looks like when we get to the game and if he can be the backup. I think the sooner he can be the backup, the better, because we're just at the point of the season where it's going to make sense to play Shedeur, right? I think either in the Baltimore game we see him or after the Baltimore game we 100% see him. I think this Dillon Gabriel experiment's got 2 weeks left in it. Some more bad news when it comes to injury. Schlesinger, Fainin, and Bond look like they might be out. I don't know what the exact status is on Harold Fainin, but it looks like he might be out. Cam Robinson was back at practice. Cedric Tillman should be back at practice, so that's all good. And look, all the news that we've gotten today, I want to make sure people remember that we really shouldn't underestimate the New York Jets this week. I know the Jets just traded everybody, and people are like, oh, they're going to roll right over, but they are aware of that perception in New York, in that locker room, And this week, they're probably going to give us one of their best efforts of the season. I really wouldn't be shocked by that, right? A lot of these guys in this locker room, they're having their pride be tested by the organization and by the fans of the organization because people are just expecting them to roll over. Aaron Glenn is the head coach over there. And look, you might not think much of him as a head coach, but the one thing we know that Aaron Glenn is good at is being a motivator. And he's going to have those guys motivated because he moved people to give other guys opportunities, and he's hoping that people are going to step up and take those opportunities. I would not go in here and assume that shit's going to be sweet on Sunday with the Jets. It's absolutely not. They're going to try to win that game like hell. They're going to try to prove something this week. This is the most motivated that locker room is going to be for the rest of the season. This is as motivated as that coaching staff is going to be for the rest of the season. I would argue that, yeah, the Jets are a 1-7 team, but this is probably the worst time to play a 1-7 team when they've made all of these moves because they're going to be the most motivated to win this week and prove a point. What they do for the rest of the season, God knows what. They made a lot of moves that I don't know are going to work out for them. But this week, maybe next week, I think they're going to get a little bit of an adrenaline boost from just making those moves, new guys getting opportunities, and Coach Glenn, turning on his motivational dial to 100. I think they're gonna be ready to go. So the Browns can't come into this thinking shit's sweet. But that's my thoughts on all the news today. Let me know what you guys think. I know it's going to be a very lively comment section with Mr. Depodesta being not even being fired. Like he just got a promotion to the Colorado Rockies. So him taking that job with the Rockies. Let me know what y'all think in the comment section below. Also, it's going to be interesting to see, right, for all the people who thought that Depodesta was like this big role behind the scenes. Will the Browns try to replace Depodesta with somebody of similar credibility? If they don't try to replace Depodesta with somebody of similar credibility, which I anticipate they probably won't try to replace him, that kind of tells you that the role wasn't as big as some of the conspiracies made it out to be. But hey, if they do go out their way to bring in another big name in the analytics world, then maybe people are on to something. We'll see. But y'all have a great day. Have an even better night. Peace.